Hello and welcome to the Endometriosis at Work webinar. My name is Sophie Kelly and I'm the Volunteer Coordinator for Endometriosis UK. We are joined here today by our guest speaker, Ginisha Vekaria, who will be introducing herself in just a moment. And we are also joined by Ruksana Ahmed, who will be sharing a workplace testimony with us. So before I hand over to Ginisha, I'd like to remind viewers that this webinar will be an hour long and we will have a Q&A section at the end where Ginisha will be answering live and pre-submitted questions on endometriosis at work. For any individualized medical guidance, please reach out to your healthcare provider. So without further ado, I shall pass on to Ginisha.
Thanks, Sophie. Welcome, guys. Thank you for coming. As Sophie mentioned, I'm Ginisha. I'm the Workplace Menstrual Wellbeing Manager at Endometriosis UK. So just quickly, a little bit about what I do. I'm currently running a project where I support and guide employers on bettering their working environment to enable women in the workplace to thrive. The project actually focuses on 6 different conditions, endometriosis obviously being one of them, but I also have covered already PCOS, PMDD, adenomyosis, and I'll be exploring fibroids at work tomorrow and heavy menstrual bleeding next week. You can find all that information on our website as well if you would like to attend. And if you have any other questions around that, I'm more than happy to answer at the end of the webinar. So, it's not going next. There we go. Just before we get into it, I just want to launch a pre-poll. So just to kind of gauge a better understanding about anyone here today, how much do you know about endometriosis and how confident you feel about talking about endometriosis at work? So Sophie's going to launch a poll. So if you can just answer the poll, we'll be up for a few seconds and then we'll get straight into the webinar. So we'll give it a few more seconds. Sophie, would you be able to let me know once you've unlaunched the poll and I'll carry on?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Yep.
Perfect. So just a quick overview of the next hour. I'm going to go into a little bit about getting support and how you can get support via Endometriosis UK. I'll talk about what endometriosis is, the impact of endometriosis at work, and then the last 2 elements of the webinar, I'll discuss what endometriosis and work and supporting colleagues look like, and then also go into kind of best practice examples and suggestions. So firstly, getting support. So in regards to Endometriosis UK, these are the kind of areas where you can get support if you are an individual with endometriosis, but also if you're here today as an employer who wants to better understand how you can how you can better support your staff that you work with. So firstly, we have support groups. So these are online and in person, and they offer valuable support and information for any of those affected by endometriosis. You can find these support groups on our website, so it's really easily accessible, and you can find a whole range of areas that you can access the groups. We also have our free helpline and web chat, again accessible via the website. We also have our Health Unlocked forum. So it's a free online community, and the forum is an area, it's a forum where you can discuss anything or get support around supporting those with endometriosis, but also if you have endometriosis yourself, it's an area where it's anonymous, so you can ask questions where you don't feel, it is a very debilitating disease and you can feel quite isolated and quite, vulnerable. So having the anonymous element could really help you finding out, better support mechanisms, tips and tricks to kind of deal with endometriosis and pain better, etc. And you can share your own experience as well. So in fact, you can help others accessing the forum too. We also have events throughout the year. We have Living with Endometriosis events. We obviously have webinars as well, which is also used as a resource tool. So you can tap into those. And we have a whole page of resources available on our website as well. We obviously have fundraising. So as an employer or an individual, you can get involved in many of our fundraising schemes, which I'll go through a little bit further on in the webinar. And finally, we have the Endometriosis Friendly Employer Scheme. And this is a scheme for employers to confirm the commitment of developing a work environment that is endometriosis friendly. And throughout the scheme, Endometriosis UK provide guidance and support for employers to support their employees. And we focus around 3 key areas. So the first area is leadership and management support. The second area is tackling stigma and changing culture. And finally, we focus on an area around communication. So if you'd like further information around the EFE scheme, you can either email employers@endometriosis-org.uk, or you can find that information on our website. So what is endometriosis? So 1 in 10 are living with the condition. Therefore, everyone who's joined us today will know someone with endometriosis. So endometriosis is a condition where tissue similar to the lining of the womb grows elsewhere in the body. More specifically, it's found in the pelvic cavity, but it can travel further and grow elsewhere. Each month, these cells break down, they build up, and they bleed. And what would leave as a period, the blood that would leave as a period, these cells have nowhere to go. So they can cause inflammation and scar tissue, and they tend to attach themselves to different elements of the different areas of the body and different organs. Endometriosis can affect from puberty right through to menopause, and the impact can be felt for life. So what does it feel like to have endometriosis? So symptoms and common symptoms include pelvic pain, painful periods that interfere with day-to-day life, bowel and bladder pain, pain during or after sex, difficulty getting pregnant, and fatigue. Many also experience heavy menstrual bleeding, although that is not an official symptom of endometriosis. And also individuals may also experience depression and isolation, difficulty in fulfilling work and social commitments. The symptoms can often be cyclical. So as an employer, it's really important to understand the condition, but also understand that each individual with endometriosis will be impacted in different ways. So no individual will be the same. Therefore, the way in which you support your staff with endometriosis will be different, and it'll be kind of a case-by-case situation. Up next, we have diagnosis. So the only definitive way of diagnosis is through a laparoscopic surgery. So it's a keyhole type surgery, and it's used to diagnose and treat conditions of endometriosis. The surgery is quite invasive. So if you do have a staff member who is on their path of a diagnosis, and they are going to have a surgery, it's really important in terms of what that support looks like in the lead up of their surgery, but also during the diagnosis journey as well. What can you be doing better to support your staff going through this? As I mentioned earlier, it's a very vulnerable disease, and having to go through surgery just to get a diagnosis is quite, is belittling, and it can be quite emotional, and there's other elements of feelings and the mental well-being of your staff that you should also take into consideration, and it's quite a lonely disease as well, and also the diagnosis journey can be quite lonely too. Just to kind of raise, having a clear scan does not necessarily mean that you do not have endometriosis if they don't do a surgery to diagnose, but they can be other ways, such as a transvaginal scan, etc. If it is clear, it doesn't mean that you don't have it. And also symptoms can be mistaken for other conditions. For example, IBS, pelvic inflammatory disease, and fibroids. Some of these conditions do tend to overlap, so the diagnosis time is quite lengthy. The diagnosis time from the current research that we have done, which you can see on the right-hand side, it has increased up to 8 years and 10 months to get a diagnosis of endometriosis. So as employers, and if you're here today as employees, wanting to better understand the condition to support your staff or your employees, the length of the diagnosis, like I said, is 8 years. that's, it's very lengthy. It shouldn't be lengthy. It's so common to have endometriosis, but unfortunately, that's why we're here today, Endometriosis UK, to continue doing research around that, and trying to kind of decrease the diagnosis time. But it is important for employers to understand that the journey of diagnosis will impact your staff and their well-being, and to be really mindful and have open conversations as much as possible. But overall, just be kind and compassionate when they are going through this. And the more comfortable your staff feel, the more comfortable they'll feel to open up and have that cultural, have the culture of openness and these conversations being navigated in the workplace. So some of the treatment options, before I start on the treatment options, just want to raise that there is no cure for endometriosis currently. So the treatments that are available aren't there to, cure endometriosis and get rid of it. The treatments are there to reduce the severity of the symptoms and improve quality of life for an individual. So treatments will, the different treatments, that will be considered for an individual with endometriosis. First and foremost, you have surgery. However, if you do opt to have the surgery, it is mindful to know that symptoms may still persist or they may come back. So here, if you're here today as an employer, it's really mindful to know, if you think a staff has gone away, had their surgery, and they're going to come back and not feel anything again, it's really good to understand that actually it's not a curable condition and their symptoms will come back. So if you have made, relevant changes and amendments to their work, do keep them in place. It will support them, and continue having those conversations around what else can we be doing? Does anything else need to be changed? Can we amend anything more for you to help you through that? Secondly, you have management around the conditions and the symptoms as well. So you can have hormonal treatments, you can pause the hormonal cycle in order to manage your symptoms. So, you can go on the contraceptive pill, the coil, the implant, and some people also do consider taking the chemical menopause as well. However, if you do have an individual who does take that kind of treatment, it's really important to know that they will also kind of have menopausal symptoms as well. So it's really good to understand that what treatment your staff are going through, because you can work to support them better around that as well. And finally, pain relief. So you can have an individual can take painkillers. There's pelvic physio, TENS machines, and heat pads to manage their pain as well. So impact, 1 in 10, as I mentioned earlier, 1 in 10, and those assigned female at birth of reproductive age suffer from endometriosis. That's 1.5 million in the UK and 176 million worldwide. It takes an average of 8 years and 10 months to get a diagnosis for endometriosis in the UK. Endometriosis is the second most gynecological condition in the UK. The first is fibroids. Endometriosis costs the UK economy 8.2 billion a year in treatment, loss of work, and healthcare costs. And as I mentioned earlier, the causes are known and there is no definite cure for endometriosis. So just want to share a few findings. So the all-party parliamentary group on endometriosis, this is where we kind of brought together parliamentarians in Westminster for a political debate around the key issues affecting those with endometriosis. Endometriosis UK is proud to provide the Secretariat services to the APPG on endometriosis. And in 2020, the APPG undertook an inquiry around the impact of endometriosis in the UK. Over 10,000 individuals shared their experiences, and these are some of the findings that came out of the report. So the report highlights the impact of endometriosis and demonstrates without investment and research and a reduction in diagnosis time and appropriate NHS pathways, those with endometriosis will continue to face huge barriers in accessing the appropriate support at the right time. And this is where the organisation are trying to make change and impact. Now, from these findings, I would just like to highlight key findings related to endometriosis at work. So as you can see on the screen, 38% were concerned to lose their job, 35% report reduced income, 27% say they have missed out on a promotion, and 1 in 6 give up work. So more needs to be done to support these support people in the workplace who are suffering from endometriosis, but also other menstrual health conditions as well, and that's quite important. So these are some real life quotes that have actually been sent to us, and they demonstrate, when there isn't the right support or the right amendments at work, unfortunately, this is what happens, and this is what we've seen and heard. They've been seen as unreliable, sacked for taking too much sick leave, passed over for a promotion, forced to quit. However, as an employer, if you are able to give the correct support, have those conversations, have a culture where your employees feel confident and comfortable to have conversations around menstrual health at work, especially, bringing up their condition that they have. The quote underneath shows when it does go right. It took a lot to open up about my condition and to be brave and vulnerable again. But as nerve-wracking as it was, I'm so relieved I did, as I'm getting the support I need. So just wanted to log that in there, because when it does go right and you are supporting people within the workplace, things can be done to enable people to thrive in the workplace as well. I want to invite now Ruksana Ahmed, who will be sharing her workplace testimonial. I am going to unshare so we can actually see Ruksana. And yeah, I'm going to hand over to Ruksana. So Ruksana is the founder of the Endo Pain Specialist. She's a women's health coach. And she uses functional nutrition approach. She's going to tell you a little bit about her career, how endometriosis impacted her, her career journey, and where she is now in terms of her business. So Ruksana, over to you.
Thanks, Ginisha. So hello, everyone. So I'm Ruksana Ahmed, and today I'd like to share with you my personal and professional journey living with endometriosis. So rewind back to 2014, where I was working in investment banking industry. I was working as a consultant for many different clients, and I was given 3 days notice to pack my bags and go and work abroad in Paris for a client. So someone at the time, I didn't know I had endometriosis. So at the time, I knew I had, all these different pains. I had joint pain, I had fatigue, heavy menstrual bleeding, IBS type symptoms, where it was like bowel urgency, almost like you're passing razor blades through your stools. So it was a full body disease. I was just tired all the time as well because of the disease, and then painful. So was waking me up in the night. So I had TMJ. So I've actually got bone loss from the pain, having ground my teeth so much. So that's kind of the symptoms in a nutshell with what I was dealing with at the time. And first off, to be given the opportunity to go abroad and to work for a client over there, I knew that would be really good for me, career growth wise, and just showing that I am competent. This is something I can take on, these challenges. However, I was also torn as well, because I knew I myself, I wasn't 100%, and I felt that I was in a bit of a predicament as to whether to take the position or not. So back then I did bring the courage to speak to my employer at the time, and I did ask for them for support, that I was needing to go back and forth to my appointments, and luckily they were able to accommodate that by allowing me to come back to the UK for my appointments, which I used to always bring my mom with, mid-20s at the time, and I'm bringing my mom to my appointments. I felt really embarrassed at the time, but for me it was something that I needed, and that support. So that was really that. I can't thank my employer enough for being able to allow me to come back and accommodate me for those appointments. And at the time, I was seen by one doctor because I was going for checking my bowel, potentially for bowel cancer at the time, because that's what they thought they might be, for a colonoscopy. And they mentioned endometriosis, And this is back in 2014, but they told me it might be a myth. And had I had known what I'd known now, you know, I probably would have approached things a lot differently. But I think at the time it felt like my life was a triangle, literally going from home, work, hospital, home, work, hospital, and that was literally just my life. And it was a secret as well because I didn't want people to know. I felt really embarrassed. I felt I had to always put on this facade at work. So I'm in pain at the time, and I'm doing a presentation, and then all of a sudden, when you've got the heavy menstrual bleeding, it's almost sometimes you feel like it's like a big jellyfish. I know it's kind of gross, but it feels like there's something like very discomforting and nerve-wracking as to, you know, what is it? You don't even know what it is, first thing. And then second thing is you're going through this, and third thing, you're at work and people are looking at you and you have to almost split yourself into two people. So you're dealing with all this pain, but then second, on top of that, you're having to put on this face as to like, I'm at work, I have to be professional, you know, there's this mindset. But what I feel that was missing back then is just really the compassion with myself, then also from other people. And had that I've been there, that would have been more from, you know, having the awareness, such as, you know, Endometriosis UK, all the great work that they're doing, you know, Ginisha and Sophie putting these webinars together. It's tremendous to have something right now to be able to reach the employers to say, look, these are the conditions that are being dealt with, women are being dealt with. You know, we don't want 1 in 6 people losing their, not giving up work altogether. How can we help you? And I think this is one of the main things that we need to really look at, how we can take that away. So kind of going back into my story about when I was working in Paris, I literally had a point where I passed out. I was actually in the cafeteria, literally just getting a tea from one of these vending machines, and I passed out, blacked out work, and then I woke up lying down, and it was like a moldy ceiling, musty smell in the air, and I was really frightened. I didn't know what they were saying. I didn't know the language at the time. And I was really scared, and I didn't know what was going to happen. And then a nurse came in and she helped me to put a gown on, and she explained they'll do a couple of tests. I was like, okay. So here I was waiting in another room with this gown on a cold table, lying down flat. And then a doctor just burst into the room, and they pulled open the gown. They were holding my arms down, which was kind of strange because they didn't say that at the time what was going to happen. So first off, the communication wasn't there. They couldn't tell me because the language barrier. But then also at the time I had my chest bare open, and he was putting the nose on and laughing, and I was really traumatized. And because I was away from my kind of home company in the UK, in the client, it was very isolating. First, having this condition, second, being in that kind of traumatic event, and then third off, not having the language, I suppose, based off the awareness, to explain exactly what was going on with myself. So then many years followed, and then I finally got my diagnosis of stage 4 endometriosis and adenomyosis. And that's after hundreds of trips to the doctors, back and forth. I finally felt vindicated, but also terrified, because they told me the next step was surgery. And for me, because I'd been on so many different pills beforehand, contraceptive pills, all these other steroids and everything else, pain killers, and they said we can't do anything right now anymore, so the next step would be surgery, the hysterectomy. And for me at the time, I wasn't married at the time, and I felt very scared because I wanted a family, and also I just, sorry, I'm just getting here, just very, it's very triggering for me. But just at that point, to be told that, and then to not have a team around you, which I felt was something that was very important. I know now there's a lot more endometriosis specialists out there, and they have, you know, pain management team, they have other nutritionists, dietitians, and other people around you, physiotherapists, as a team to help, to support women with endometriosis. But at the time, I felt really lost, and I tried to speak to actually my employer at the time, and they told me, if you're in so much pain, just take painkillers. And I just feel that that was really just from their point of view, they didn't know how to deal with that. And I feel that having the awareness, knowing that there is a conversation around such topics like endometriosis, adenomyosis, and other gynecological and hormone related conditions, I think that's really important to break these taboos, especially from the South Asian community. Periods, who wants to talk about that? They label it as, well, in my community, bimar, which is like illness, or you just have you've got an illness and a woman's problem. But I feel that we need to break this narrative, especially starting in the workplace, where we can be a bit more neutral about that and not have these biases dictate how the conversation goes. And I think this is what actually brought me later on to kind of go on my own journey to say, okay, what can I do myself? How can I take control of my condition? What is in my hands? And that's when I looked to find a coach. So just as a footballer will go and find a coach, I myself went on to find somebody who could help, because personally I felt that the only options were presented to me at the time weren't something I wanted. So then I looked on to find somebody in the US, and this Dr. Jessica Drummond, who'd been helping women for 25, 30 years, was using lifestyle changes to better manage the disease. And I literally just fell in love with the way she was actually helping you to take control of what was in, understanding first of what your triggers are, understanding how it impacts you in particular. So my understanding is that there isn't anything as, we can't just say it's, you've just got endometriosis and that's it, it's a box. I feel personally that there are endometrioses. Everyone has a different version of the condition. So for example, an aunt of mine who has endometriosis as well, she had it in her kidneys, but she had no symptoms, just the problems with the urination, because it was actually blocking part of one of the nodules. So it's, again, you've got the same named condition, but it doesn't present itself exactly the same. And so from there on, when I was looking at better understanding the endometriosis, how I can take things into my own hands, whether that be through food, movement, structural issues that I was having, even at the level of your nervous system, when you're so highly upregulated because of the stress. It's a natural thing. So your body is in this constant fight and flight. And to be able to understand all these different modalities and actually apply them to myself and see, oh my goodness, it actually does, help me to feel much better. I'm no longer passing on the street waking up with bruises, which I was doing, back 10 years ago. I'm in a much better condition where I've been able to better control it and go on to have, a little baby boy when I was told I wouldn't be able to have a child. So I feel that there are positives that can come from this. It can teach us so many different things. It's not a life sentence. There are things that we can have within our own hands. So that's why I then retrained as a women's health coach, and then I specialize in endometriosis, to help other women to actually reclaim their lives from the disease. I believe that we're here to make a difference, and I feel that I found my calling in being able to help the endometriosis community. So if anything resonates with you, with what I've said, or if you want support as an employee, then do feel free to contact me on endopainsspecialist.com. That would be something that would be interested for you.
Thank you so much, Ruksana, for sharing your journey with endometriosis. Ruksana will stay on, so if anyone does have any questions at the end that are for Ruksana, she can answer those as well. But thank you once again for sharing your journey. And we'll send a link for your endometriosis endo specialist at the end as well, or we'll send it to the attendees today. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. There we go. And yeah, from the back of Ruksana's journey that she's just shared and her workplace testimonial, we're now going to look at endometriosis in the workplace and supporting colleagues. So, work together to achieve a positive outcome. So before I get into the depths of things, I've split this up into two. So we're going to start with what we ask employees to consider. So share information. I know it will take some time to have conversations around your condition at work, but if you can start sharing information, whether it be, really minuscule stuff with perhaps, people that you're close with, your colleagues, etc., about your condition, about different conditions and treatment plans and options. Explain what you're experiencing and how it affects you. Seek advice and support. So if you have a HR team, on the NHS website, Endometriosis UK's website, but also your own support network as well. And this can be, within work and outside of work. Thirdly, don't assume or expect an employer to make reasonable adjustments automatically. It can take some time. Obviously, also different jobs and different job roles will indicate how much adjustment can and can't be done. So it's also understanding your employer as well. So be open-minded about your working arrangements. But also, when the arrangements have been done and they are no longer working, do let them know. So don't feel like you have to continue working in that set reasonable adjustment that has been set. This condition changes over time, your lifestyle changes over time, and also your journey with a menstrual health condition changes drastically within your career. So if things aren't working, make sure you say. And try and understand the challenges from your employer's perspective as well. And if you're here today as an employer, things to consider. Knowledge is power. So although your staff are coming to you saying they have endometriosis, make sure you take some power in regards to understanding the condition, doing your own research. That can be really powerful for an employer to come to you and you already kind of know bits and bobs about the condition. It makes them feel heard, and it just makes them feel they have the support that they actually need to, go a bit deeper into that conversation around their condition and what they need done in the workplace for help. How can your organization implement best practice? Are there things already in place? And if there are things already in place, do your employers know that? So really navigate those conversations around, policies that are in place that people don't know about, or protocols and procedures, etc. Think about, as an organization, what are you trying to improve? And also, what are the challenges so you can start mitigating against that as well? So just a few areas to start thinking about. I'm going to go into best practice and suggestions. I have split this into 3 areas. So we'll first go into policies and support, and then we'll discuss awareness, and then practical considerations as well. So policies and support. As I mentioned previously, are policies and procedures supportive of those with endometriosis? Check your existing policies to ensure those with endometriosis or potentially cyclical symptoms are not disadvantaged. One key example is logging in your sick leave. On your drop-down, what options do you have? People with endometriosis or any other menstrual health conditions, when they're logging in their sickness, are they logging it in as other? And if so, it can be really powerful for an individual with a menstrual health condition such as endometriosis to have an option that states menstrual health leave or menstrual health sick leave as an option. You make them feel seen. They're not just classed as other. It's quite a powerful, bold movement as well. And yeah, all in all, it really does create more of an advantage to your staff by just changing that small little thing. Facilitate conversations about individual needs and see what flexibility can be applied to them for them to thrive at work. You will only really understand someone's condition through conversations, so please make sure you're having them. These can be in one-to-one, they can be quite an informal setting. It doesn't have to be very formal. Allow your staff to feel comfortable and make sure you're also comfortable having that conversation as well. So the area and a safe space, which feeds into my next point around encouraging staff members to feel they have a safe space, and colleagues who understand their experiences is really important. Appropriate train appropriate training for line managers to create a supportive environment. This can be training around menstrual health, but also train managers to be confident having conversations around menstrual health. So they are able to cascade that awareness of the condition within the workplace as well. It doesn't just stop at that manager. The more other people can learn, the better. Chronic pain conditions means managing symptoms. So again, understanding how each individual, what their condition looks like. As Ruksana mentioned, every individual with endometriosis will be different to someone else that has endometriosis. Therefore, their symptoms will be very different as well. So really understanding and managing that as well is really important. Health and wellbeing initiatives. What do you currently have in place for your staff, and do they, support those with menstrual health conditions such as endometriosis? What do they look like? Can you be doing more around health and wellbeing that support those with endometriosis in the workplace? Occupational therapists and HR guidance. Do you have guidance around that? Do you offer occupational therapists, reports, etc., to really dictate, reasonable adjustments for individuals? Also, do your staff know that? If they do know this, it can be really empowering for them to take action and really be able to, put things in place for them to, be thriving in the workplace. Acknowledge that some staff might be suffering without being diagnosed, or may not even be aware they have an illness. So just be supportive. And finally, be kind and compassionate. Again, something that Ruksana also picked up on as well. It's really important to be kind and compassionate. Up next, I'm going to talk a little bit about awareness. Awareness is obviously a really big thing. So raise awareness around endometriosis at work to help staff feel supported. Do all managers know about the differences of the condition, how the condition impacts their staff? It can be incredibly supportive and empowering and a real relief for an employee to say to their line manager, I have endometriosis, and to hear back, I know what that is. Let's have a conversation around how it impacts you and how we can support you. It can be quite draining for an individual to continuously go over what the condition is, how it impacts them, what they need to be, what needs to be put into place. But if you were to flip that, and if someone was to come to, go to a staff member, I know what that is. Let's just have a conversation on what we can do to support you. That is so empowering for an individual. They feel heard, they feel supported. And yeah, overall, it creates a better working environment for them. Include more menstrual health information within the organisation. Menstrual health groups. So discuss around having, a women's health at work group that advocates for women's health. If you feel heard by other individuals that are going through similar things as well, you can really drive to make change in your place of work as well, having these work groups as well. Collaborate with experts and organizations. You guys have all attended this webinar today. Here at Endometriosis UK, we also offer lunch and learn talks where we can come to you and to your employer. Start gearing up the collaboration around, menstrual health at work and endometriosis at work. Take action in the workplace, take part in fundraising challenges, join employer schemes to show commitment to create supportive workplaces. As I mentioned earlier, potentially joining our endometriosis friendly employer scheme. We're also taking part in our fundraising challenges such as Go Yellow, Host a Tea for Endo, and our 1 in 10 challenge as well. Foster a workplace culture that values and supports mental health, discourage stigma around mental health conditions, and encourage open conversations. A mental health condition such as endometriosis, it can be quite lonely. It can be quite, it can cause depression. You can feel quite low because you feel alone. So it will impact an individual's mental health and their well-being. So it's really important to also have values and a workplace culture that also supports that. They work hand in hand, menstrual health and mental health. So if you're supporting one, make sure you're supporting the other. And take time to learn about the condition and don't use it against your staff. For example, they're PMSing again. That is not the language you want to be using in your place of work. That is also not the language that an individual needs to hear. You need to take time to learn the condition, and it's not just because people are PMSing again. That is not good enough. And finally, practical adjustments. So think about practical adjustments that could help someone with endometriosis at work. So, for example, easy access to toilets. How far away are the toilets from an individual's desk, etc.? Just start thinking about that. Also, what's in the toilets? Can you provide period products within the toilets? Sometimes, although most of the times it is cyclical, there might be times, that one may experience bleeding and spotting. They might not know it. You just don't know when it's going to happen. So having those products in the toilets can be quite uplifting and supportive of an individual with a menstrual health condition. Access to private spaces if they're experiencing pain, but also when they are experiencing pain, when I mentioned earlier about treatment options, things like TENS machines and hot water bottles, have a culture where you allow those kind of things in the workplace. It's not that we don't want to be there, that your staff don't want to be there when they're experiencing pain. No one wants to be at work when you're kind of, kneeling over, or you just need to, go and kind of relieve yourself with, having a TENS machine or a heat pad. If you allow those small kind of adjustments, overall the culture of the workplace is a lot more empowering, and it just makes their life a little bit easier in the workplace as well. If you do have a workforce that requires to wear a uniform, consider having other options. For example, different sizing, as those with endometriosis may experience some bloating. Darker colours for those experience heavy menstrual bleeding. Those little changes can make a big impact to your staff and their well-being. Consider flexibility around working hours. This would benefit those with endometriosis and enable them to thrive at work, such as working from home days, if they are having a flare-up, etc. They can still do the work, they can still put in the hours and make, they're still competent. It's just creating that flexibility for them to be able to thrive. Appointments, allow staff to take doctor's appointments, as they are very rare to come by, but also because some of these appointments are synced with menstrual cycles and have to be conducted at certain times in the month and even within the day. And also think about reassigning work or duties. I'm not saying you reassign everything for everyone, but if someone is experiencing a flare-up, or they know that there's a week coming up that they are going to experience flare-ups, can you have conversations within your team or your workplace to discuss what your working week looks like? Where can you kind of delegate certain tasks and work duties, and just prioritize as the weeks go on? So this is kind of an overview of best practices and showing a really balanced scale. So you've got at the top someone who has repeated absences, poor staff retention, performance, isolation and apathy. And if you balance that out with a culture of openness, you put in the relevant adjustments and adaptations, you have a supportive line manager, and you have resources and signposting for these staff members with menstrual health, it can really balance out not only their work life, but as a business as a whole and as an organization, it can work really well hand in hand and create a very balanced scale for the individual, but also for your company. So I think that's really important to understand. Here we have more quotes that I wanted to share. These are real life quotes. These are quotes taken from employers and employees that we worked with that have attended some of our webinars. So we have started a women's health initiative at our work. Suffering from endo and not really knowing what I can and can't do, it's good to see I can ask for some flexibility. I feel empowered to speak to my manager about flexibility around my working hours and days. I have a woman on the team who has endometriosis, so it's helped me better understand the condition and how to best support. Discussing menstrual health in the workplace with the same attitude that one would discuss a broken ankle has really helped to normalize words, spread awareness, and make me feel so supported as a result. And finally, they allow me to go back to my hometown and work from there, so I can be closer to my family when I'm not doing so well with my mental health due to my physical symptoms of adenomyosis and endometriosis. So those are just a few that we've picked out for the webinar today, but it really shows when you do have the support in place and, workplaces are open to a kind of better working culture, you are making a massive difference to individuals with endometriosis. So people you need in your support team. And obviously today you've come here to discuss endometriosis at work. But also I just wanted to highlight someone who has endometriosis, think about your support team and what that looks like. But if you're here today who is a supporter of someone who has endometriosis, I just want to do a few takeaways and just something for you to think about. So someone in your support team, you need someone who celebrates your wins, no matter how big or small, but also shows up during the hard times. You need someone who takes things off your plate to make those hard days easier without being asked. Someone who makes you feel seen, validated, and normal. Someone who tries to learn and understand through asking and listening instead of making assumptions. Someone who asks how they can help and understand that individuals with endometriosis have different experiences. Someone who checks in from time to time. People with endometriosis often struggle with maintaining their energy levels and attending social gatherings. So that checking from time to time is so valuable. And finally, someone who does not judge you. Endometriosis is complex and it's challenging for individuals to predict when they'll experience a flare-up or pain or energy fluctuations. So just wanted to highlight those top things to really be able to support someone with endometriosis, but also who you need around you in regards to your support team. Just wanted to share a few resources. So I've just highlighted a few on our Endometriosis UK site. So we have resources around law and best practice for employers. We have an employer's guide to rights at work on our website, and also managing your endometriosis at work too. I've also put in endometriosis accredited centres, which you can find on the BSGE website, where there's a list of hospitals that are shown to you that are accredited centres. So if you are going through your diagnosis journey, do tap into that resource as well. And obviously today Ruksana has mentioned herself as well. So that'd be a great area to tap into. So just before we go into our Q&A, I'm just going to get Sophie to launch the last poll for today. So we'll give you a few seconds to answer those, and then we'll open the floor to a Q&A for myself and Ruksana. I will unshare my screen at this point as well.
Brilliant. So that poll is now live. I can see people are already answering it, which is great to see.
Sophie, am I still sharing my screen?
No, your screen is gone, don't worry.
Thanks.
Okay, while we let that poll sort of work its magic, why don't we get started on some of the live and pre-submitted questions? So we did have a few live questions come in. I'm just going to open them up and have a look. Someone wanted to share, Ruksana, that they resonated so much with what you said, and I completely agree. Thank you so much for sharing. Somebody's asked, is there an endometriosis awareness day we could focus our awareness on? I don't mind answering this one. There's actually a whole month in March is our endometriosis action month. So it's a great month for raising awareness for the condition, campaigning, speaking up about it, and we're very active during March. But really any day is a great day to raise awareness for endometriosis. We've had a few people asking if the slides will be shared. This webinar is recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, and we will circulate different resources that Ginisha and Ruksana have mentioned following the webinar too. I can see a few different questions in here. Someone's asked about how would they go about organising a lunch and learn talk with us.
So there is an area on our website. If I can do it now, I'll try and send the link in the chat. But there's a form, so you'll sign up and the form will get sent to employers at endometriosis-uk.org. And someone from the team, either myself or another individual, will contact you, and we can arrange a date that is suited for you. And we can have a conversation around, your expectations from the lunch and learn, what do you want to cover? And we'll kind of make the talk quite bespoke to your company as well. So I can actually tap into it now, actually.
Yeah, and what we can do is we'll circulate as well post webinar too, so people have access to it. We've got someone asking ways to manage sort of feelings of guilt and calling in sick frequently due to endometriosis.
I think so. Calling in sick, I'm going to start with that. Let me just come back to you guys. Really sorry, I don't know where my Zoom's gone. So I think calling in sick, I don't think you should be, you should be felt feel guilty, sorry. I think if your employer knows about the condition and you have been quite open with them in regards to having endometriosis, and having these flare-ups, that ongoing conversation around, I know I'm going to flare, within this week, or I can feel a flare-up come in, therefore you can kind of preempt, hopefully, if you can. I know some people can't, but you can preempt and let your employer know. But in terms of guilt, obviously it's an area where, as an individual, it's a lot of work that you have to do on yourself, I think. It's hard to kind of eradicate that guilty feeling, but if you are not able to, perform to your 100% at work because of your flare up, that's not down to you. I kind of put it in a way when I talk to people is, you'd rather be 100% working than be working at like 30% and stress about not being 100%, which will in theory just keep flaring and adding to that stress and that pressure. So I think first and foremost with the guilt, just work on yourself. It's not your fault. People didn't ask to have endometriosis. We don't want the condition. So it's easier said than done, I know, but try not to feel guilty. Your work will still be there, your colleagues will still be there. But I would really encourage, if you can, having those open conversations with your manager or your with your colleagues, etc., to really help you feel supported through that. And I think that will really take away some of the guilt feeling as well. So I hope that helps. Gonna end the poll.
We have had a question as well on, do we have any specific guidance for line manager training, or can you recommend any training, or is that all from EUK?
So we do some training. So again, I'm going to send the link for the Lunch and Learn talk in the chat. So if you actually type in, there is a box where it says what you're asking for, etc. And if you type in that you would like training for line managers, etc., again, it's very similar in terms of what I've said previously. We'll get in contact with you and we will actually pre-meet with you before the talk and discuss exactly what your expectations are, what your needs are from the talk. That could also turn into a training. Also, the endometriosis friendly employer, if you do join the scheme, we have training tied in within that as well. So as part of the scheme, we'll run a few training sessions throughout the year for yourself and for your employers. We'll also have endometriosis champions through the scheme, and they will also be trained up as well. So internally, if you're an individual or your manager needs support and guidance, they can go to the endometriosis champion first before they contact us, because the champion would have had the relevant training to be able to discuss any matters that do arise.
Brilliant. I'm going to go to some of our pre-submitted questions as well. Someone shared that they find that during their endometriosis flare-ups at the beginning of her cycle, they have to take about 2 to 3 days of work because of the severity of pain. They're asking how do they best go about navigating receiving support at work, as obviously it's not a viable option having those days off every month for them.
So there is, obviously, like I mentioned, we have the rights at work on our website. So it's a guide that you can access, and we have our hints and tips for dealing with employers as well on the website too. Again, I also think having that conversation with your line manager and the HR team around, and I'm not saying every employer can do it, but again, if you were to have that conversation, you never know, they might say yes, is around looking at what your sick leave policies are. Again, when I mentioned earlier, do they benefit those with a menstrual health condition? And if there is if there are amendments that can be done, so rather than calling in sick, those can be kind of, potentially your non-working days, and you make up the hours elsewhere in the week or elsewhere in the month. Again, I'm not saying that will definitely happen, but those are conversations that, and minor adjustments that can be done if you are to speak to your employer. So you're not really using your sick leave days, and you are working your hours and you're still fulfilling your work commitments, but there are put in place to kind of aid you and to support you on the days that you cannot work. Like Sophie said, we will send the links, etc., after the webinar, so you will have access to those guidance as well, that you can read through, but also you can take to your HR team as well, which will be quite useful to know and to have.
We've also had another sort of pre-submitted question, just someone asking, I'm often in too much pain to get to work, but they can work from home. But they're asking, how do I, and they've put in sort of quotation marks, how do I convince my employee to let me have these days working from home as and when I need them?
Again, I'm going to go back to, and I know it's hard for some people as well, because it's such a vulnerable condition to have. But your employer will not know the full extent as to why you're needing to work from home if you cannot have that open conversation. I know a lot of it would also, be around whether your employer has a culture of openness, like I showed the scale before. I'm hoping they do have that. And if they do, they should take it on board. They should understand. And it's not as if you're not doing the work, you're just working from home. And we know that there are ways that, you can be doing that. And if there is an area, or if there is a conversation that is quite difficult to have, perhaps signposting your manager or your HR team to our website, and like the guidance that we're going to share around later, making that known to the HR team or your manager, that can be quite supportive. Also more than happy for them to reach out to us, and we can support them to better understand the condition, for example. But I would be quite honest and open. And if you can't speak to your line manager, I would say, speak to your HR team. That will be a good stance as well.
And we've had a live question here, which ties into something you were mentioning earlier. They've said, I was recently absent as a result of my symptoms, and for the first time I was open. I've just reviewed my record and it's been recorded as diarrhea and sickness. Would you request for this to be changed?
I would take action. I know I mentioned earlier advocating for yourselves. I actually previously went to a talk a couple of weeks ago, and from that conversation with the employers, they've actually gone on and they're willing to change one of the drop-down options and include menstrual health conditions. So I think it's a very important area to highlight, because you're probably not the only one either. And I think it's good to show organizationally what the sick leaves and the options, etc. You didn't have diarrhea, you didn't have, what was it? You didn't have diarrhea as a sickness. It was a menstrual health condition, and I think that should be there as an option to really empower people. And the more we talk about it, and the more that we see it, the more these conversations will organically happen in the workplace, I think. So definitely raise it, I would say, and hopefully you do have an option for menstrual health embedded soon.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ginisha. And just sort of one final pre-submitted question from someone, just asking what they can do if they feel they need to raise something further. Who can they go and speak to? Are there any other sort of places we can signpost them to?
Yes, definitely. So you obviously, like I said, you'll find the kind of guidance on our website. But if you are looking for more support around, workplace and just menstrual health, etc., I would go towards, the best go-to places is Citizens Advice Bureau, also from unions, etc., and other organizations that are relevant to your work. Do they have anything that can support you? Can you contact anyone in that area as well? And also your internal HR. You can have conversations with them, but also you should have, a pool of resources that they offer as well that you can tap into too. So I don't know if I missed anything on that part, but there are obviously organizations that are set up that can support you with this, and you can readily access them as well. So
just another one, just to add there, it's a really good organization is ACAS.
Yes,
they are, they've helped, I know, a lot of people in the long term. And when I'm speaking on the volunteering as well that I do with Endometriosis UK, this is somewhere that I signpost a lot of people to, if they aren't getting the help they need in the legal perspective as well, if that's the route they want to go down.
Yeah, thanks, Ruksana. Yeah, that's a really good point as well.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. I think that draws this webinar to an end. What I will say is I know there are a few different questions that were submitted, not about endometriosis in the workplace, but we will pass them on to our specialist advisor to help answer them, and we will get back to you with answers when we can. Can I just say thank you to all for attending, and a massive thank you to Ginisha and Ruksana for obviously sharing this webinar and sharing their story with us.